He left me sick and broke. Now he wants my money. My name is Ashley, and if you had told me a year ago my life would become the twisted saga it is today, I would have laughed in your face. Back then, I was blissfully ignorant, convinced I had the perfect marriage. We were the picture of domestic tranquility. Me, rapidly climbing the corporate ladder as a project manager at Richardson Financial, and Robert, my ever-supportive husband, always home early, whipping up gourmet dinners while I navigated the cutthroat world of finance. I am more than him, but he never seemed to mind. In fact, he reveled in having a successful wife. Honey, I made your favorite pasta tonight, he'd announce, greeting me with a loving kiss as I walked through the door, exhausted from another week of soul-crushing meetings and impossible deadlines. You spoil me too much, I'd reply, completely unaware of the darkness that was lurking just beneath the surface. We had our routines, our shared dreams. We were diligently saving for our dream home. We'll have our own place soon, Robert would promise, scrolling through real estate listings on his phone while we cuddled on the couch, bathed in the warm glow of possibility. Just another year or two of saving. We talked about having kids someday, but agreed to wait until we had our own place. Everything seemed so clear, so certain. Then came that fateful Tuesday in March, a day forever etched in my memory as the day my carefully constructed world began to crumble. I was in the middle of presenting quarterly projections to the board when the room started spinning. The faces around the conference table blurred, morphing into grotesque caricatures. The last thing I heard was someone shouting my name before everything went black. And the next thing I knew, I was waking up in the sterile environment of the emergency room, surrounded by concerned faces and the ominous beep of monitors. A doctor, his face etched with professional concern, held a clipboard. "Mrs. Parker," he said gently, his voice a harbinger of doom, "we need to run some additional tests, but the preliminary scan shows something concerning. There appears to be a mass in your brain." The word mass echoed in my head like a death knell. I felt my world tilting on its axis, painfully aware of every word that followed. I listened as the doctor laid out the grim possibilities. "We'll need to do more extensive testing to determine if it's benign. And if surgery is even possible," he continued, his eyes betraying the severity of the situation. "I need to be honest with you. Even if surgery is an option, there's a significant risk of long-term disability." How was I supposed to process this? Would he still want me if I couldn't function normally? We had promised in sickness and in health, but this was different. This was real. I took a cab home from the hospital that evening, the city lights blowing into streaks of meaningless color. When I opened our front door, I found Robert in the kitchen, nonchalantly stirring something that smelled suspiciously like beef stew. The normalcy of it all was a cruel joke. "Robert," I called out softly, still standing in the doorway, bracing myself for the storm that was about to break. "I need to tell you something." He turned around, wooden spoon in hand, but the smile immediately dropped from his face, replaced by a mask of apprehension. "What's wrong?" I told him everything. The fainting spell, the hospital, the looming mass. His face grew increasingly pale as I spoke, but what happened next was utterly soul-crushing. "Will you be able to keep working?" he asked, setting down the spoon as if it had suddenly burned him. "What happens if you have to quit? Do we have enough money?" I stood there, dumbfounded. My husband had just learned I might be facing death or permanent disability, and his first concern was about money, about my ability to work. "We have our savings," I managed to reply, trying to keep the hurt from my voice. "It should be enough to get us through the initial period. We can figure out the rest later." Right? He nodded, running his hands through his hair, his eyes darting around the room as if searching for an escape route. The savings. The next few weeks were a dizzying blur of doctor's appointments and tests. The headaches were getting worse, and some days I could barely focus on my computer screen. "Ashley, you need to take some time off," my boss, Sarah Mitchell, finally said after finding me slumped over my desk, head in my hands. "We can arrange for 6 months of medical leave. Your health has to come first." I knew she was right, but being at home all day was harder than I expected. The walls seemed to close in on me as I lay on the couch, grappling with terrifying questions. Would I die? Would I survive, but never be the same? And then there was Robert's increasingly erratic behavior. He started coming home later and later, sometimes well past midnight. When I dared to question him, he always had the same tired excuse. "I'm picking up extra shifts. We need the money for your treatment. Don't you understand?" Sometimes I'd hear him on the phone in another room, speaking in hushed, secretive tones. My mind, already clouded with fear and anxiety, started conjuring even darker thoughts. What if the tumor was malignant? If I survived but ended up paralyzed, would Robert stick around to take care of a disabled wife? After weeks of trying to handle everything on my own, I finally broke down and called my mother. I had been avoiding it, not wanting to burden her with my problems, but I needed her more than ever. "Mom," I said, my voice cracking as she answered the phone. "I'm sick." As soon as I explained everything, she didn't hesitate. "I'm coming over right now. "Sweetheart, pack my bag this minute." She arrived the next day, a beacon of maternal strength in my increasingly bleak existence. I was having one of my bad days, barely able to make it from the bedroom to the bathroom without getting dizzy. She took one look at me and switched into full mother mode, fussing over me just like when I was a little girl with the flu. Having mom there was like being wrapped in a warm blanket. But not everyone was happy about her presence. Robert, predictably, bristled. "Your mother doesn't have to stay here all the time," he said one night when we were alone, forcing a weak smile. "I can take care of you, but you're hardly ever home anymore," I pointed out, my voice laced with a weariness that went beyond physical exhaustion. "Because I'm working for us." After 2 weeks, Mom knew she couldn't stay further. "You seem stronger now, sweetheart," she said, though I could tell she was reluctant to leave. "But I'm just a phone call away if you need me." The next few weeks were a blur of medical tests and clinic visits. The house felt empty without Mom, and Robert was spending even more time away. But I forced myself to focus on my health, getting through each day, clinging to the hope of good news. Then, finally, after what felt like an eternity, I got it. At my latest appointment, my doctor was actually smiling as he looked at my test results. "Mrs. Parker," he said, his voice radiating optimism, "I have good news." My heart skipped a beat. "The tumor is benign, and it's in a location where we can safely operate. The risk of complications is minimal." I burst into tears of relief. After all these weeks of uncertainty and fear, there was hope, real tangible hope. I couldn't wait to tell Robert. Maybe now, things could go back to normal. I practically floated out of the hospital, already planning how I would share the incredible news. I decided to head straight home, hoping to catch him before he left for work. I quietly inserted my key into the lock, but I was immediately met with the sound of his voice. He was talking loudly on the phone, apparently not expecting anyone home at this hour. "I can't take it anymore," he was saying, his voice dripping with frustration. "You don't know what it's like living with her. The constant smell of medicines in the house is just unbearable." My hand froze on the doorknob as he continued, his words like a venomous poison seeping into my soul. I know, but you should see her now. She's nothing like the woman I married, always complaining about Heather Chesson too young to be playing nurse to an invalid." Each word felt like a physical blow, a brutal assault on my already battered heart. I stood there, paralyzed, listening to my husband disparage me to another woman, my legs trembling beneath me. "Yeah, the money situation is being handled. We've got quite a bit in savings. Look, I'll figure something out. I just need to get out of this situation before she gets worse." I pushed the door open fully and stepped into the room. He was still on the phone, his face draining of color when he saw me. "I'll call you back," he stammered, disconnecting the call with a frantic click. What was that all about? My voice came out steadier than I expected, a fragile shield against a tsunami of emotions threatening to drown me. For a moment, he looked genuinely panicked, but then his expression shifted to something colder, more calculating. "Well, I guess you heard everything," he said, a hint of relief creeping into his voice. "Maybe it's better this way. We need to talk about what?" I asked, though I already knew what was coming. "I want a divorce," he said, so matter-of-factly, as if he were discussing the weather. "Let's be realistic, Ashley. You're sick, and I'm not going to spend the best years of my life taking care of an invalid. I need someone young, healthy. I deserve that." I stood there, absorbing his words, thinking about the good news I had just received from the doctor, realizing it wouldn't make any difference. This wasn't about my illness. It was about who he really was. "We need to do this quickly," he continued, gaining confidence from my silence. "Before your surgery, I'm not risking being legally tied to a disabled person if something goes wrong," I said. Quietly, I agreed to the divorce. He seemed surprised by my quick agreement, perhaps expecting tears or pleading. "Good," he said, recovering quickly. "I'll go to a hotel tonight. I don't want to stay here anymore. I'll come back tomorrow to pack my things." "That's probably best," I replied, my voice devoid of emotion. Robert grabbed his jacket and wallet, not even bothering to pack an overnight bag. At the door, he paused for a moment, his eyes flickering with a hint of something that might have been guilt, but it was gone as quickly as it appeared. Then he was gone. As soon as I heard the door click shut behind him, I decided to start packing his things. I couldn't bear the thought of seeing him again tomorrow. As I moved around the house, gathering his belongings, my eyes fell on his laptop, still open on the dining room table. I've never been the type to snoop through my husband's things, but something compelled me to look at the screen. What I found made my knees buckle, and I had to grab the back of a chair for support. In full view was a series of intimate messages between Robert and Sarah Mitchell, my boss. As I scrolled through their conversation history, I was confronted with explicit photos and the intimate details of their encounters. One particular message chilled me to the bone. "At least her condition gives us more time together. She looks like death warmed over. I can barely stand to look at her anymore." My hands were shaking as I continued scrolling, but what I found next made me gasp aloud. The messages between them were equally intimate, filled with declarations of love and plans for secret meetings. One message read, "Does your husband suspect anything?" Sarah responded, "John's clueless, as always. Too busy with work to notice what's happening under his nose." I felt sick, but I forced myself to keep reading, my stomach churning with a toxic mix of anger and betrayal. With trembling hands, I grabbed my phone and started taking pictures of everything. Something in me knew this might be important later. The divorce proceedings moved quickly after that. We didn't have much to untangle, no children. A house was rented, and our only joint asset was our savings account. With the $10,000 we'd been saving for a down payment on the house money that had come primarily from my higher salary. I never minded that imbalance before, but now it felt like a cruel joke. "Your Honor," Robert argued during the proceedings, his voice dripping with false sincerity. "My contributions to the household were equally valuable. I managed all the domestic duties, allowing Mrs. Parker to focus on her career. The money I earned went directly to household expenses, utilities, and daily necessities. I even sacrificed my own career advancement for her." The judge, seemingly swayed by his performance, agreed with his argument. "The court finds that both parties contributed equally to the marriage, albeit in different ways. The savings will be divided equally between Mr. and Mrs. Parker." Just like that, half of our savings, the money I worked so hard to save, was now being split with a man who had betrayed me in every possible way. After the divorce was finalized, I couldn't stay in that apartment. There were too many memories, too much pain. My mother welcomed me home with open arms, providing a safe haven where I could begin to heal. 2 months after the divorce, I finally had my surgery. The procedure went exactly as the doctors had hoped. Each day, I felt a little stronger, a little more like my old self. During my recovery, I stayed with my mother. She was my rock, just as she'd always been. But I started noticing she seemed more tired than usual. One evening, as we sat in her cozy living room, drinking tea, she took my hand, her eyes filled with a quiet sadness. "Ashley, sweetheart, I need to tell you something," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "I've made a decision about my future." She paused, taking a deep breath. "I found a wonderful nursing home, Sunset Gardens. It's peaceful, and I have already paid for my stay there." She squeezed my hand. "I want to spend my remaining years somewhere I won't be a burden." Mama started to protest, but she shook her head gently. "Let me finish," she interrupted with a smile. "I've thought this through. The house will be yours, along with my savings. About $300,000. You deserve a fresh start after everything you've been through." I tried to argue, but she was resolute. A week later, I helped her move into Sunset Gardens. The place was beautiful, with lush gardens and a variety of activities, and Mom seemed genuinely excited about this new chapter in her life. After getting her settled, I returned to what was now my house. It felt strange being there alone, but for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe freely. Life has a funny way of serving up moments of perfect timing. About a month after Mom's move, I was sitting in my favorite cafe, enjoying a quiet lunch break, when I heard a familiar voice. "Ashley, is that really you?" I looked up to see Robert's mother, Margaret, standing by my table, her face ashen as if she'd seen a ghost. "Hello, Margaret," I said, gesturing for her to sit. "I can't believe it," she stammered, shaking her head in disbelief. I couldn't help but laugh, a bitter, hollow sound. "He told you I was dying, didn't he? Well, as you can see, I'm very much alive. Still working at Richardson Financial, actually." Margaret's face went through a series of emotions before settling on something between shame and satisfaction. "You know," she said, leaning forward conspiratorially, "that woman he left you for took every penny he got from the divorce and then left him. He's got nothing now." I didn't need to say anything. Margaret's tone told me she was as disgusted with her son's behavior as I was. "He made his bed," she said, shaking her head. "Now he has to lie in it." As I watched Margaret leave the cafe, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I hadn't wished ill on Robert. I'd been too busy focusing on my own recovery to think much about him at all. But I'd be lying if I said it didn't feel good. I was sorting through some old photos in my mother's living room, and I heard aggressive pounding on the front door. Before I could even get up, the door burst open, and Robert stormed into the house, his face contorted with desperation. "You lied to me," he shouted, barging into the house like he still had a right to be there. "My mother told me everything. You're completely fine." I stood up slowly, keeping the coffee table between us. "Get out of my house," I said, my voice trembling with barely suppressed rage. "Your house?" He laughed bitterly, a harsh, grating sound. "The house your mother conveniently left you after our divorce, along with all that money." He ran his hands through his hair, his eyes wild with greed. "Ashley, baby, I made a mistake. I was scared and stupid. I still love you. We can start over." Love me? The audacity. I felt a cold anger rising in my chest, a fire that threatened to consume me. "You're a traitor, Robert," I spat, my voice dripping with venom. "You abandoned me when I was sick. You cheated on me. I want nothing to do with you. Why didn't you tell me you were getting better?" He pleaded, his voice cracking with what he probably thought was emotion. But I recognized it for what it was. Greed. Why didn't you tell me about your mother's plans to leave you all this? You want to know why? I stepped closer to him, my eyes blazing with righteous fury. The day I found out my tumor was benign, the day I rushed home to tell you the good news, was the same day I heard you on the phone with your mistress, talking about what a burden I was. He had the decency to flinch at that, but recovered quickly. That's not fair, Ashley. You deliberately hid your mother's inheritance from me during the divorce. Half of all this belongs to me, by law. No, it doesn't, I said firmly. Mom left me this inheritance after our divorce was final. You have no claim to it. Bullshit. He was shouting now, his face getting redder. You knew this was coming. You and your mother planned this. You hid assets during our divorce proceedings. That's illegal, Ashley. I'll sue you. I'll take you to court and prove that you deliberately concealed future assets during our divorce. You'll have to give me half of everything. I stood in my mother's living room, watching him rant and rave, feeling a strange sense of detachment. When he finally paused for breath, I walked to the desk and picked up my phone. I think you should see something, I said, holding it up, displaying the screenshots of his conversations with Sarah Mitchell. The color drained from his face. You remember Sarah, don't you? I scrolled through the messages slowly, letting him see every damning detail. I wonder what John would think about these messages, about the photos, about all those lunch breaks you spent with his wife while claiming to work overtime. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my racing heart. I'm trying to recover from a serious illness. I don't need this stress. I don't need your threats. I don't need you bursting into my house making demands. I locked my phone and set it down. Leave me alone. Robert or John gets copies of everything. Your choice. He stood there, mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Finally, he backed toward the door, his face a mask of defeat. As he turned to leave, I found myself saying goodbye. No, Robert, it was as if a switch had flipped. I just stopped being afraid. After he left, it was truly over. The next few months were transformative. I sold my mother's house for an excellent price, thanks to the hot real estate market. With that money and the inheritance, I bought a small condo downtown, 3 blocks from my office. The walk to work became my daily therapy, helping me rebuild my strength, step by step. The illness had taken its toll on my body. I'd lost nearly 20 pounds during the worst of it. But slowly, I began to recover. I started taking yoga classes in my building's fitness center, gradually rebuilding my strength and flexibility. My appetite returned, and with it, my energy. My boss, Sarah, proved to be more understanding than I could have hoped for. Take all the time you need, she told me during my first week back. We're just glad to have you back with us. She arranged for me to work flexible hours, allowing me to attend my follow-up appointments and therapy sessions without stress. Sometimes, on my morning walks to work, I catch my reflection in the sleek glass buildings and barely recognize myself. Not because of the weight loss or the small scar hidden beneath my hair, but because of the confidence in my stride. I was no longer the woman who had been afraid of being alone. Through mutual acquaintances, I occasionally heard bits of news about Robert. He was still living with his mother, having blown through his divorce settlement with Sarah. Whether he quit or was fired from his job, I never found out, and honestly, I didn't care anymore. My mother thrived at Sunset Gardens, making new friends and taking up watercolor painting. I visited her every Sunday, drinking tea and talking about everything and nothing. She never said, "I told you so," about Robert, never reminded me that she had doubts about him from the start. Instead, she simply said, "You're strong, sweetheart," and I finally believed her. Like the potted orchid on my new apartment's windowsill, a housewarming gift from my team at work, I was blooming. The tumor, the betrayal, they hadn't destroyed me. They had forced me to grow stronger roots. So, Reddit, after hearing my story, do you think I handled the situation correctly? Should I have given Robert another chance, even after everything he did? Was I right to threaten to expose his affair to his mistress's husband? I'm really curious to hear your thoughts and opinions on this whole mess. So please let me know what you think I could have done differently, or if you think I made the right choices considering everything that happened. I'm still trying to process everything, and your perspective would really help me gain some clarity on this whole ordeal.